Alrighty, hello every folks, and good morning. Welcome to a bit of a discussion here, on a kind of funny relationship between two games here. Namely, the as of yet unannounced, and I guess nobody's even given any hint towards this, Triangle Strategy 2, and Sword of Convallaria. Now, with that said, what I wanted to go over here is the stuff that I hope that the TS2 learns from SOC here. Because here's the thing, Triangle Strategy tried a lot of things, and frankly, I respected it for its ambition, but there was a lot of stuff that was like they started and just kind of stopped halfway through, you know? And that was kind of one of those frustrating things, at least for me personally, because it constantly was this thing of like, okay, this voting mechanic is freaking cool as hell, and then you just kind of get a freebie for most of the votes in the game. Or like, you know, this idea of traveling around these different areas before you get into these fights is very Shining Force. This is awesome, like, we want to see more of this. And then it seemed like they sort of gave up about a third of the way through the game, and that was the weird part about it. Because it had ideas, it had these really golden moments, like the way that Triangle started, the way that the golden route ended, solid. Everything in the middle, it felt like it was sort of like, you know, that meme of the horse that's like really well drawn on one side and a crayon drawing on the other side? That's more or less what it felt like to me personally. Except it was more like one really very well done tail, one very fancily drawn head, and then just like the middle is just a pile of spaghetti somebody put on there. Now, I know that seems a bit harsh, but part of the reason for this is because they clearly had the ambitions for a lot of these things to be fleshed out. Like we already discussed this on several videos before over those situations where, like, we know that a lot of the bar fights were originally supposed to be alternate scenarios. There's still dialogue in the game from what were supposed to be alternate choices that you could make, especially with stuff like, you know, going and assassinating the leader of the Pinks to avoid fighting their actual populace, to do things like siding with them, switching sides, to having Roland switch sides against you, and that's the kinds of stuff that makes this concept very fascinating. But it didn't quite, like, completely get there, in my opinion. Again, still very fun game. I'm just saying the potential for something really dang neat is there, because essentially, in my mind, when it comes to the voting mechanic, the kind of plot mechanics or whatever else of Triangle here, the idea is actually very... I would say many of the ideas that it tried saw a lot of progress made in something like Sword of Convallaria. Don't get me wrong, it's not perfect or anything, but as far as progress, I would say there's a lot of stuff that was expanded there for future titles. And additionally, it's worth noting that many of the things that it tried is kind of like a just more, I guess you could say, less dry version of what you see in a lot of more like political simulator kind of games, stuff like your Crusader Kings and whatever else. Where it's supposed to be more kind of, standard strategy RPG kind of stuff, but you still have those, those kinds of elements in there. So to that end, and, largely because I want to just discuss all of these things together, let's go ahead and discuss some of the stuff that the Triangle 2, or a theoretical Triangle 2, could learn from SOC in the future. And yeah, let's go ahead and kind of look into this here. So first and foremost, we're just gonna kind of load up whatever here. I don't know exactly where anything is. We'll just go ahead and load up one of these, because really the first place that I want to start off with here is actually going to be the camp itself, because this mechanic is one of those ones that kind of constantly was a sticking point to me personally between fights, between stuff that happened, because these guys just never move. They're like, it reminds me of the Skyrim mannequins, because they're all here. They'll occasionally get an extra line of dialogue or two, but these guys are all just sort of kind of sitting around here, right? Like throughout all of it, you occasionally see somebody new, but again, it's like these two, this guy that lady and this guy are long-lost lovers that just can't seem to figure out, to travel a couple meters to go talk to each other. And like you see them barely interact throughout their short kind of a subplot kind of thing. But it's like, come on, you can't turn slightly. Like, we're really gonna do that? But anyways, the reason that I mention this, and we'll cover this when we switch over to SOC in a moment here, is because there were a lot of disconnects like this. We got Roland that never acknowledges that his dude came back. We've got her never acknowledging that anybody else ever switched sides. We've got Shield Guy. Is Shield Guy ever even in this camp? I forget. Actually, no, yeah, that's him over here. Like, these two, you'd assume them two over there would have something to talk about. Um, but yeah, it felt like there were a lot of unresolved hanging threads here. And again, most of the random stuff that they mentioned was meant to have its own subplot or something had gone over to the bar. But I'm hoping whenever we get a Triangle 2, hopefully down the line, my biggest hope from all of this is just more life from this kind of thing. See, to an extent, I like the camp mechanic. Like, I sort of love the camp mechanic, but also kind of have notes, you know? So first of all, it's cool that everybody's here in one place. However, as far as upgrades go, I think the upgrades and the shops inside the camp itself were a bit of a mistake. Again, we'll get to why when we get over to SOC, but I feel like having everything right here, while convenient, kind of misses the point of the exploration stuff. And this initially started coming to mind when I was doing a no camp challenge for this game. Like, I partially recorded it, got completely bored, but there were a few interesting notes to get out of it there. In fact, actually, we have that over here somewhere. In fact, I hit the wrong option, and I think we went straight into a fight or something. No, this is one of the final fights, whatever. Here, let's go ahead and load that up real quick, in case you're wondering what that might look like. But during all of that no camp challenge, one of the things that was very notable is the constant kind of availability of what I typically refer to as the inside shops, which were the random merchants that would show up in random locations that you travel to, and usually in a normal gameplay sense, the main issue that they run into is that they're usually just redundant stuff that you could have already bought elsewhere, right? That they're usually just stuff that was already around, and let's say there's some extra stat boosters that you would like to have one or two extra of, and they happen to have them, and you just happen to be in the right place to go look for them. And so, in those kinds of situations, it kind of gives you a bit more of an appreciation for those shops being there. But next to your standard shops, they're a little more than a minor convenience. But when you're doing something like a no camp run here, suddenly this means, hey, look, you're actually super limited in terms of the items that you can get a hold of. Your actual stocks of items are not exactly anything to write home about, and so it, in theory, would give you more of that feeling of, you want to go around and pillage all of the little bits and pieces here and there. You want to go look at these shops. You want to go and talk with everybody and whatever else, and it gives you that wants to go explore more, and that was, again, one of those things that was strong in the early game for Triangle here. So, like when we were going through in the early game, let's say when you were over visiting the Reds, there was a moment when you found let's say, like a Vanguard scarf over in the lava. I think that's where that thing was. It's been a bit of a minute. But it was this situation where, yeah, you found this very useful item. You managed to to find something potentially game changing that could make a difference over time, and it was one of these things that that in theory should be very special. However, a lot of those items felt like they were just sort of there. Like, who's leaving $500 under a tree? Like, why is that here? This is a place that's saying that they're struggling, and they're just like, yep, $500 under a tree, sure. Like, a lot of the item locations were very weird. Like, okay, fine, ranged ice stone, sure. Maybe somebody hid this here to go attack somebody with, in which case we maybe screwed them over a little bit. But, like, nobody's just leaving their friggin' wallet under a tree, this random location here. And so let's say there were those other moments where it was like, okay, you go and you're talking about how people are pillaging the capital. How could they do this? And then you're going and rifling through all of their dishes and finding piles of cash. It's like what, are we pawning off their dishes? Is that really what we're doing here right now? It's a kind of weird combination of, this is not what we should be doing right now, and what is this even doing here to begin with, And so it would have been cool to have more moments like where we later see in the Salt Flats, where there's essentially a slave worker that had passed out, and they carried an item with them that I believe gave somebody extra stamina or something along those lines, and it's like, wow, that is a really messed up thing that they were using this thing to try to still keep doing their job and work to death. Like, that is a great moment of world building. That's great as a just kind of wink and a nod kind of thing. And I wish there was more of that, because frankly, there's very little of it. And SOC obviously doesn't really do that much of that sort of thing either, but it would have been very cool to see better placement of items, because early on, yeah, early on that makes sense. Reading about sandwiches in the library, that was pretty good. Reading about mechanics from the library, also very good. But just randomly finding notes like, here's a pamphlet on somebody's random life that just sort of happened to be in the middle of the floor or something. A lot of the item locations were weird, right? So I'm hoping for Triangle 2, I'm hoping that that this is less of a what I hope they learn from SOC thing, but I'm hoping that they take a note from the Dark Souls playbook and just put items in more sensible locations, because there were very few throughout the game that really stuck out as like, I believe that this was here. Like, pillaging something off somebody's shelf, sure, but going and finding somebody's wallet on the floor 37 times in a row is just bizarre. That being said, you might be wondering, why am I swiveling around this map here? This was actually the other thing that I'm surprised they didn't do, because this is something, I mentioned this in a video a while ago. This is actually something that we saw done in SOC in a few cases, but additionally was done very well in Banner Saga, where when we have situations like this, that we're about to be attacked, why is there nothing out here? Like, I know we're supposed to be just an icon on the map, and we're exploring the icon on the map. Visually, I appreciate that, but can you at least put, like, some chess pieces over there? They're about to frickin' attack us, and you're just like, nope, it's road. There's nothing here. And the moment before this, the fight before this, where the Reds are going and showing up with their whole army or whatever, they're like, this whole big army's out here. All us NPCs are so terrified. Please go win, and maybe don't burn down my house. It'll be the only thing that somehow affects the extra chapter at the end of the game. And it's like, there's just nothing out there. Like, you got this whole map. Somebody took the time to make this. You're not gonna put something out there? Like, it's weirdly barren, So it's kind of odd that that's out there. Anyway. So let's see. I don't even remember what we were choosing here exactly. Anyway, yeah, but my main goal with that no camp run was to see more of those mechanics. But truth be told, it made surprisingly little difference whether there was grinding unavailable or whether there was equipment unavailable. Or whatever else. I really wanted to see more of the voting mechanic. I was really hoping that if there was less to interact with, maybe the convictions would matter a bit more. And that's actually the next thing that I want to talk about, which is when it comes to character relationships. Because I was really, really rooting for this game when it first came out. Like, in that moment where, this guy was talking to his wife, and it's like, she ends up calling him out for his bullshit on his first choice. And I was thinking, there's going to be something there. It's going to be a bunch of things that are maybe being affected by these relationship mechanics. Maybe people are going to be vindictive against each other. And pretty much none of that happens until the final chapter, give or take. Final few chapters, give or take. Like, when you get to the big route split towards the very finale there. And it really felt like there would be more going on there. Like, I was surprised that even something like Until Dawn or any of those kinds of games had more going on with their relationship mechanics than this one that's got the voting system. In fact, actually, there's probably some lessons to be learned there, too. I really would have expected, for example, if somebody ends up getting repeatedly downed in a fight. Like, let's say Roland, he gets himself freaking bodied all the time with his glass cannon setup, right? And so I would have expected that maybe that would have dropped their relationship a little bit. Maybe there would be, a little bit of animosity between the two. Like, hey, dude, buddy, maybe stop standing me up to the front. I'm clearly bad at this. And no, they just don't care at all. You'd think that his wife would get a bit upset at getting trampled by the cavalry. But no, she's perfectly fine and does not care whatsoever. And again, it felt like there was this constant reset towards the status quo. And to that end, that's where I want to go ahead and quickly switch over to SOC at this point. So let's go ahead and discuss that real quick. One more thing before we switch over there real quick. I want to talk about the kind of roster and recruiting mechanics here real quick. Because, so having gone through the thing and basically, gotten everyone, maxed out everyone, done all the routes, whatever else, one thing that I was noticing here is that there was, again, a lot of potential behind this right here. Having people join you based off of your reputation, cool. I like that as a mechanic. Having stuff be completely unmissable, though, that was another one of those things that was just kind of odd. So, basically, looking at your entire roster, there's absolutely no character that you would possibly miss after going and playing a few times. And frankly, this is something that even, Smash Brothers doesn't have an issue with, that there's still characters that you have to unlock by specific means. So I really would have expected to see a bit more of, people being locked behind certain situations, maybe more people, having specific choices be required or whatever else, to not have them leave or get killed off or whatever else. Because frankly, throughout all of it, it felt very bizarre to see that there were so many characters, and yet how many of these guys have any impact on the plot whatsoever, or even any interactions with the plot whatsoever. Obviously, our main guy is going to have an impact. We got Roland, who's got all the impact and none of the backbone. We've got we've basically got our first few right here. So almost up to the end of our third line here. Once we get to Rudolph, it's implied that he's going to have some sort of relationship with the guy that opens up the border to the north later. Never does anything. We've got this guy that's kind of implied to have some ties to the Blues. We never really hear from him again. We have this guy who's, an advisor. You'd think at some point he'd have a chance to vote. Nope. We have our spy dancer lady. You'd think she'd have some kind of insights every now and then. And as soon as you recruit her, she's just noped out of the story. You see a bar lady talking to people at the bar. That's pretty cool. You'd think that there would be some reactions outside of the golden route to, the top enemy general joining you. Nothing. You'd think that maybe, the bandits joining you would give you something extra. Nah, just a unit, as you do. This guy, he's just kind of here. Her being a doctor, it's implied that she'll have, again, more impact when she goes and leaves her faction to go join you, but she just sort of shows up and she's just on your team now. All of them were just like, here's my background, here is a cutscene, and I am now here. It really felt like there should be more. I mean, it's weird that of pretty much everybody on here, this guy is probably the only one that actually... It was this guy and this guy, of all people, that got a kind of post-game scene. And it's like, okay, this lady controls the weather, and they're having a massive issue with droughts. No impact whatsoever. This guy, he was like a friggin' legendary soldier among his people there, and he was supposedly dead, and everybody was super sad. Nobody even acknowledges that he came back after his cutscenes. He's just like, no, I'm just here now. This guy was an enemy general. Nobody cares. This guy was an enemy general. Two randos mentioned that he should have a new nickname. And he's just fine now. All war crimes forgiven. It's okay. Again, I wish they had done more with this. So I hope whenever they do get to Triangle 2, again, we'll get to this from the SOC side, but I want to see more from these characters interacting with things. And please don't let it just be this guy. Why this guy, of all people? I don't care that he has a plate business. I want to know what happened to the barrel. Tell me what happened to Math Tub. Tell me why nobody's reacting to this dude. Tell me, what this lady's been inventing or whatever else. We got a frickin' geomancer over there. That seems like it has some ramifications. No? Okay. It's just all the interesting characters, and they're like, this guy has a mom, and... Are his time powers important? No, don't worry about that. Don't worry about him literally controlling space and time. Don't worry. He's adopted, though. Or no, he meets his mom. That's what it is. He meets up with his mom. And, don't worry about the enemy generals switching sides or all the stuff that they got up to. Nah, none of that matters anymore. It's okay. This guy sells plates. I wish that they had done more, And again, we know that they wanted to, so I'm hoping whenever Triangle 2 happens, maybe they'll give them more time. Now let's go over to SOC proper and talk about some stuff that was evolved. Well, that's a bummer. 3 of my keys have expired. Anyway, only 39 more in the bank. I think we'll be okay. So let's go ahead and discuss some SOC here real quick. What exactly did this do that was maybe different, that might have maybe handled certain aspects better? So, okay, now... First of all, first thing that I want to get across here is, please, oh please, Triangle 2, whenever you do happen, because I'm pretty sure you will. Frankly, a lot of these kind of continuations of these kinds of games feel like they're as inevitable as the march of time, but when it comes to a Triangle 2, please don't copy this monetization structure. I'm glad that SOC exists, but I hate the fact that it's always online. For example, something like Tactics Ogre came out on the PSP, right? It has sat there comfortably on my PSP or Vita or whatever else I happen to have at any given time, just happily sitting in my pocket at all times, ready to go at a moment's notice, and just turn it on, ready to go. No additional load times, no additional anything. It's just there. You put it on standby, you put it back. And I'm hoping once SOC comes to Switch, maybe we'll see something similar. But Always Online is just a completely no bueno experience for me personally. But again, this manages to mostly thread the needle. Fights will save in the middle of fights, and you can mostly continue on from where you were. And typically, fights don't go that long. Now, that said, let's go ahead and talk about a few things here that I hope do end up getting carried over. For one thing, I was talking about during the endings discussion for SOC, how it felt very nice to see a couple things carried over. For one thing, when it came to the kinds of stuff that we saw from Tactics Ogre, that kind of quiet reputation meter that we saw, where certain characters would, let's say, find themselves in a position where, they are potentially in a situation where they're judging you, or they're arguing with you, or whatever else, and they may potentially disagree with you, and will actively act upon it. That if they have some sort of beef with you, that they will make a kind of conscious decision to go and, just kind of disagree with you here and there. They may directly not join you. You may not have enough money to do a particular event. Like right now, on this particular playthrough, ended up having permanent negative 5% attack power for everybody in the city, because we just simply spent too much money on training and didn't have enough to deal with a famine. And while obviously the gameplay ramification is there, there's also story ramifications that end up happening as a result. And that's one of those things that to me was lacking in Triangle, that feeling of you made a bad choice and we're going to stick with it. And so, for example, at no point were there those moments where it's like you, let's say, messed up a decision multiple times, you screwed up something here or there, and somebody just got killed off. And like, let's say in something like Tactics Ogre, what happens? You don't save somebody, they get shot in the face, they're dead on the spot. You tell them off when they're asking to go join you. They're not going to be like, oh, haha, you funny scamp. They're going to be like, no, like, fuck you, I'm out. And they just leave forever. But there's that constant feeling of sort of pseudo-realism going on, where it feels like people are constantly reacting to the stuff that you do. And while SOC has a far lower cast than either a Tactics Ogre or a Triangle, it does oftentimes feel like characters will be reacting to the stuff you do. Many people mention, for example, going down a similar route than I did through the story the first time through, and many ended up getting different results depending on how much they sided with different people. And that kind of long-term relationship mechanic means a lot for something like this, and especially, again, was something I was hoping to see out of Triangle there. Like, my dream scenario for one of these things is to have the characters get downright vindictive. Like, if you, for example, let's say, let somebody constantly get sacrificed during fights, that they call you out for doing that. If you, let's say put yourself in a position that let's say you constantly disagree with somebody's decisions, that they will regularly come back and call you out for it, or even start stabbing you in the back. Like, how cool would it be, for example, if you constantly went against Roland's decision and he started going around and started convincing people to vote against you regardless of what you did? Like, he just constantly was going around and just convincing people to vote against you. Like, he pretended to be your friend but was stabbing you in the back. That kind of stuff feels like it would add a ton to the immersiveness of that particular scenario. Because that's really the problem. That's part of the reason that a lot of his storyline doesn't stick for many, is because he's meant to be going through this character growth where he's seeing how people are dealing with situations around them. And I want to take a little bit of a comparison here, comparing two different versions of a very similar thing, where we have the story of our main character here in SOC, compared with Sereno from Triangle there. Now, their stories aren't exactly a one-to-one, but there is a very noticeable moment, and specifically I went to the fountain because one of the fights happens here. But we see these moments where it feels like your main character is getting talked up for their ability to make decisions, right? And in both those cases, it starts off a little bit awkward, because it's like, I just made a choice, whatever, let's, just move on here. But let's say in Triangle's case, we have Roland over there who's supposedly learning from those decisions. But it doesn't really feel like he ever learns anything. He still makes the same mistakes from the start of the story all the way to the finish. He's always constantly seeing a choice and basically turning around and bending over. That's more or less his reaction to every situation. Oh no, I received resistance. Quick, let's give up faster. And it feels like, he would be gaining some growth from that. And then you get to the blue ending, and what's his response once you finally go down that route of making peace for everybody? Oh wow, everybody's enslaved, and his immediate reaction is to give up to the blues. Now, let's go ahead and compare this with, let's say, some of the growth we see on the SOC route here, where let's say we're around the middle of the game here, and in my case, this was Sam that was going through that particular route, and so they start off in a position where they're essentially just the meek, churchy sort, right? They're basically just showing around, showing everybody their religion. Or wait, wrong building here. They're supposed to be showing everybody their religion or whatever else. They're healing the sick and whatever else. They're teaming up with your head scientist of your base here to go deal with a zombie outburst, more or less. Now, in that particular instance, they start off as a pretty weak and fairly mild-mannered character. Then, partway through, after your first big decision there, they end up shifting to the point of basically being like the frickin' laser pope, where all of a sudden they're like, no, I'm actually secretly like the Inquisition the whole time. Just like throws on a mask, starts lasering people from the sky, and they become a spirit of vengeance, more or less. They become Holy Batman, and at that point, it seems, like they're just going to go down that particular route, but as they continue going down that route, they start seeing the kinds of choices that their faction is making, and depending on how you interact with them, like if you just go along with it, they end up going full bore down that route, and essentially they just end up losing themselves to the violence that they created. If you, for example, essentially hold them back during fights, and let's say, just go out of your way to protect civilians, only deal with the people that are instigating fights and whatever else, then you start noticing in several back-to-back fights, they're like, okay, hold on, this is actually working, maybe. Maybe we don't have to kill everyone. What a choice. And sure, it is a very kind of blunt kind of option, but it is cool to see that, they have that interaction in play. That they have that choice that can be made. And what's funny is, again, they did plan this for Triangle. They did have that idea there, because that's what was supposed to happen with Roland. That if you go down the hyper-violence route, he continues going down that route, and has a tendency for overcorrection, but that's fine. That's a character flaw. Whereas, let's say instead what we got was that set route that it just sort of feels like he's flip-flopping the entire time. So if they had left, for example, the option in for him to betray you to go attack the Pinks anyway, that would have been, again, just a great solid moment where there's a clash between characters, that it feels like there is a threat to the status quo, And that threat is very important to these politically minded sort of games here. That feeling that it's not just you making all the decisions. Like, sure, it takes away some agency for those folks that want to min-max anything, but honestly, for the kinds of simulation they're going for, screw that mindset. That's not helping anybody. If you want to have a better experience out of that whole thing, let people miss stuff. Let stuff go wrong. It's what gives these scenarios teeth. Like those moments where you find yourself mismanaging money in SOC here, it gives you consequences for it. Those moments where you're just kind of blindly mashing through text, missing that there's some additional interactions between fights, there's different routes that end up happening, and that's pretty awesome. Or, for example, I mentioned earlier how doing certain missions caused people to potentially show up in town or whatever else. And this was another great example of essentially taking something that is basically a free mechanic and adding some value by kind of keeping it out of reach a little bit. Like, when it comes to your merchants and stuff, you actually do not have that many merchants in town, and in fact, normally you don't. But let's say you take some missions for the town, you protect some nearby merchants or whatever else, they stop in for a week or two, and they suddenly give you the option to sell things. You do not have the option to sell things otherwise. So you can, for example, go and maybe buy stuff that you wouldn't otherwise have access to. You can sell things that you wouldn't normally have an option to, and they show up for all kinds of different things. And again, this is taking that same idea that Triangle had with just putting those random merchants in town or whatever, and now they're still in your town. They're traveling merchants that are revisiting it, but just by keeping them out of arm's reach and not giving you those options by standard, they feel that much more special. They're not an extra redundant option, they're just something that is, you know, a limited thing that pops in and leaves. It gives everything more life, it gives it more teeth, it gives it more kind of, you know, more flesh, so to speak. So either way, I hope that, again, that lesson in particular is learned. As far as the town design, area design, whatever else, traveling around, if that's what's preferred for Triangle 2, because, you know, they love their Octopath and their traveling and whatever else, that works just fine, but don't give you the permanent merchants and permanent upgrades and whatever else just in your main menu, because it takes away from all the rest of this. Throw that stuff out in the field, and suddenly there's a lot more reason. Like, imagine if you couldn't upgrade if you didn't visit the Reds early. Now suddenly, like, on one route, somebody's getting all of their upgrades through... upgrades through equipment. On the other route, somebody's getting more recruits with unique skills or something. It's taking the same stuff that's already there, but again, giving it more teeth by taking stuff away. And it's, again, just a good way to do things. So I would have loved to see, again, just more interactions between people, more interactions with these shops right here, and additionally more reuse of skills. So to this end, I want to talk about one of the other weird things that always bugged me about Triangle there, which was the way that they refuse to reuse certain things. Let me see if I can find... Actually, you know, let's just go to the training menu real quick. By the way, if there's any chipping and chopping on this whole thing, I'm still rendering the Union Level 0 run in the background, and that thing's been rendering since yesterday. It's not a short video, so it might take a little bit of a minute. Sorry about that. Anyway, is it freezing? No. Okay, so let's say for these different training scenarios, right? There's a ton of skills that could and should have been assets that were reused in other places. Like, it seemed like Triangle almost had an aversion to reusing the mechanics that they already established, which is just odd to me, because usually, again, when it comes to SRPGs, they're usually very good about being very efficient with their assets, because most of the time it's the narrative stuff, the scripting stuff, and whatever else that all the budget goes to. For some reason in their case, like, let's take a look at, let's say, Jens and, I forget the name of the other one right now, but, like, you got two characters that do traps. You got Trapper Guy, that puts down his bear traps, you got Jens that puts down his knockback traps and his crossbows. And it's like, why does nobody else get to reuse any of these mechanics? They are exclusive to them, they have unique, kind of unique interactions and whatever else with characters, they have specific animations and whatever else, and it's like, you put all that work in, but you're not going to reuse that for anything else. You're telling me we can't have, let's say, bear traps that do different things. Like, say, we saw in Felseal, we got bear traps that hurt, that charm, that poison, that do percentage-based damage. Like, just a bunch of different traps that are technically using the same stuff, just applying a different on-hit effect to it. With those crossbows, like, we can't replace that crossbow with something else. Like, maybe have a magical crossbow, maybe have an area of effect crossbow, maybe have one that shoots battle axes. I don't know. Something. Like, reuse that thing. It's a cool mechanic. Why does nobody else get to use it? The reason I mention it in SOC's case is because that's what this training thing is for. They put all of these different skills in here, and they're like, okay, look, for the single player mode, just absolutely go nuts. You want to have Molotov cocktails on your soldiers? Go for it. You want to have them all just running around with friggin' tetanus on their weapons? Honestly, they probably should be maintaining them better, but whatever. You know, you want to have these unique shield mechanics. You want to have these different area of effect mechanics. Like, just allow this stuff to proliferate a little bit. Allow it to be spread around. It's a way to introduce customization without introducing too many new assets, you know? It's a very efficient use of everything that you've already made. So I'm hoping that they do more with that. Like, just let them train people to use traps. Like, I would love to see, speaking of interactions, like, let's say somebody has a unique mechanic. Okay, don't put a menu in like this. Have them be the teacher. You bench one of your people, they train one of your other soldiers to use a more limited version of their skills. Suddenly, you're bringing in the ability to see people doing stuff around camp. You're allowing them to go and spread around some of these skills. You're giving a lower version of those skills. It doesn't matter, but still, you're essentially benching two people to go customize, you know, one unit later and stuff like that. It gives you a way to give people something to like rest between fights or whatever else. One of those things that SRPGs often struggle with and one that's actually seen a lot of evolution over the recent years, is this idea of getting stuck to an ace team and using nobody else. And again, SOC learned a lot of lessons here through things like putting people into training, things like putting people to rest, throwing them into away missions. We've got stuff that was learned from FFT, from XCOM, from Battle Brothers. We've got stuff that was learned from all over the place to, again, combine it all together into a situation where, again, we have people feeling benched, but they're doing useful stuff while they're being benched. They're doing stuff that still needs to be done, and that's very, very good for immersion, very good for making people keep trying different builds, because that little barrier right there is one of those things that causes a lot of SRPGs to get stuck, where people do not try new stuff. And they insist that, no, the game's just imbalanced, you guys. God, it's my way or the highway. You give people a good reason to go use other units, not by just rebalancing them, but by giving them stuff to do, giving them missions to do, giving them training to do, giving them rest time. It means that they will keep using different units and learn new mechanics, complain less about the stuff that they don't know yet, to go learn new things. And again, this is something that a lot of games struggle from. Even something like Tactics Ogre struggled from it, and their way to get around it was the level cap, where once people realized that there were no additional levels to gain, they're like, wait, what if I just actually try new stuff? So there was that too. So I'm hoping that also gets learned a little bit. Less said about the Luxai Workshop, the better. Let's go back to here. What else do we want to discuss? I mean, again, this really did do a lot of the stuff that I was hoping that an SRPG would do. I just wish it was offline, and wish that it was, you know, playable on something that is, well, it's playable on a lot of things. Eventually, it'll probably be on Switch, playable on a Steam Deck, playable on a phone. Honestly, it's still very cozy in all of its versions. I can't really complain about that. I love that you can redecorate. I wish it was more than one room, but I'm sure that'll happen eventually. Like, honestly, SOC has done so much stuff right. Actually, this is another thing that I really appreciate. So a little bit of fell seal action going on here. For those that were wondering why I haven't covered some of the other stuff, we'll get to that in just a second. But it's cool that you can just sort of park your units around. I figured this lady probably wants a tree for a vantage point. I figured this guy was supposed to be guarding this cool-looking plant. I think he might just be hypnotized, I don't know. And then this guy's supposed to be guarding the door, but, like, where's your weapon, soldier? Anyway, let's see. Okay, so, why exactly, on a completely different note, have I not covered Fool's Journey a bit more? It wants my leader to be a different level, and apparently they are not that level yet. And I think you have to go through the grinding mode, and I haven't really bothered to check. So that's more or less where that stands. There was supposed to be, apparently you gotta get a level. I'm pretty sure, again, you have to go through the grind mode for that. This was fun. Like, going through these modes is all well and interesting. I will say, though, completing the story mode before Fool's Journey, a little bit of a funny moment, because it ended up leaving me with a bunch of upgrade materials, which I randomly threw into some random knife. And so the result was that the first spy that I had on hand, this Crimson Falcon here, basically got a ridiculously OP knife just kind of has been one-shotting everything throughout the entire beginning so far, which, yeah, it's still early game, but still, you know, it is what it is. I probably should have put it on a bow or something, but it was just the first weapon that I had. What about you? You've got a bow. Can we up? No, I think I threw the rest on this bow already. I don't know. I hate these kinds of MMO, or not MMO, I hate mobile upgrade mechanics. Like, this stuff just doesn't do it for me. I don't like this. Like, this kind of incremental upgrade bullshit, I hate this. I hate that so much. I want the item to just be the item. It's like the absolute limit of what I can tolerate for incremental upgrades on weapons is like Dark Souls, and even then it kind of rubs me the wrong way, you know? It's like, just let the weapon be the weapon. How much, like, realistically, you don't put more sharp on your sword. It is a sword. Was it built right in the first place? Good, then just sharpen it. You don't just put more metal. Anyway, whatever. Okay. So, that's kind of the, I guess you could say that's kind of the short version there. While not a perfect one-to-one for everything there, What I want to see from a Triangle 2 is I want to see more kind of interactions between people. I want to see them going and talking to each other more often, interacting with each other, maybe training each other. That would be really cool. Having the ability to see your plot characters actually have grudges against each other would be really neat. Like there were a lot of cases that just felt like people should have different relationships. Like, for example, these two actually as a bit of a kind of down thing for what SOC did. Like, you know, this guy, let's say, with his dumb haircut, he was annoying me in every plot event, so I just permanently assigned him to be a lumberjack. And you'd think putting people into punishing stuff like that, like, that's the kinds of stuff that causes people to riot and have fragging incidents in real life. So why why on earth is he just okay with doing that job the whole time? You know, I would like to see menial jobs actually seen by these random units as being menial. You know, just like actually have some sort of like punishment mechanic, some kind of I guess like discontentment mechanic or something. Weirdly enough, of all things, it was Metal Gear Peace Walker that almost had that, but then you just made everybody happy through food, so they didn't really care. But it would be cool to see more of, like, more just kind of like stress meter management type of mechanics for your basic soldiers and especially your plot characters. Like, if somebody, the reason that I mentioned the people getting mad about getting knocked out thing, they handle being knocked out in SOC by making them more tired, which is fine. It makes their stats go down, makes you want to bench them and whatever else, but it also leads to a situation that if you think about it, like, if somebody's super tired, are they really going to be open to a discussion? No. And imagine those situations where you just lost a bunch of people in a fight, and they are pissed at you, and they are tired. Like, have some sort of way to, you know, maybe cheer them up, maybe cheer up a limited number of them. Like, make the politics matter more. There's a reason that every house is sold with baked cookies. Nobody is actually baking cookies in those houses. They're just taking some cookies they bought from the store, putting them on a plate, and putting them in the oven. It makes the house smell like cookies. It makes people happy when they go there. They think food. They think happy thoughts. They love that house. It's a classic tool used by realtors since forever. I want to see more of that in these kinds of politics type of games. You know, there's a little stuff mattering in terms of making your people care. Like, this lady, if she got punted off a cliff over and over, I would imagine she would be pretty annoyed when it came time for discussions. If Roland got himself set on fire, I'm pretty sure, you know, maybe he would have a little bit more to say when it came to whether he wants to, let's say, get himself captured and have some medical care, as opposed to getting a horrible infection by staying with us and having a standoff. You know, I want more of that situational stuff to matter for a Triangle 2, because the potential is there for something incredible, and I really, really hope that they do more of that this time around. Also, you know what? Completely unrelated story. I thought this bunny sitting on a pillow was ridiculous the first time through, and then recently our friend had actually adopted what was supposed to be a meat bunny, and like I just go around their house. I had to do a double take. I'm like, why is there a big ass rabbit in your living room? There's like, yeah, no, we just have a bunny. Like we just have buns. Like they shit on the floor. They're not a very good pet. They don't listen. They bite me, but they're cute, right? But it's like, I thought it was ridiculous, but yeah, apparently just letting your bunny run around the house is somewhat normal. Anyway though. So that's just a few things. I want to see more town interactions. I want to see more of those, like, temporary visitors and whatever else, or just kind of you being a visitor in a temporary location, maybe giving it a bit more of that, like, I guess, honestly, okay, the perfect example already exists. Be more like Legend of Mana. I guess that's really more of it. I just want to see more of that. There's like weirdly specific interactions, like you cut somebody off in the middle of a sentence and they're annoyed at you the next time you talk. You know, you decide to ignore somebody's help to go help somebody else with a similar request. They're pissed at you later. I want to see more of that, you know? Anyway, so, oddly specific rant aside, hope this made at least a little bit of sense, and yeah, I gotta get going. Y'all have yourselves a good one. Take care.